my name is Sydney Monahan, and it might be hard to tell, but I'm autistic. You can see this photo when I was 4, stacking my toys together in a line, like every normal child. I'm also gay, but I don't have a photo for that. Also, my favorite color is green. So now you all know a little bit about me, so I have a question for everyone. Do you know who this is? Now, you probably don't know who it is unless you're a farmer, unless someone does know. Does anyone know? I can barely see you guys. Just yell at me if you know. Oh, someone knows? Oh, good for you. Well, I need to inform the rest, though. This is Temple Grandin, an animal scientist who has designed the facilities that more than half the cattle in the U.S. reside in. She's also written many science papers, books, and more. And she also just so happens to be autistic. Some other successful autistic people include Elon Musk, Daryl Hannah, Greta Thunberg, and many more. So, isn't it crazy that autistic people are 6 to 9 times more likely to attempt suicide? Now, autistic people aren't inherently more likely to. They're more likely to because of how society treats them. Speaking of which, people have been using autistic as an insult. Today, I'll tell you about 4 insults, their negative connotations, their meanings, and how they affect everyone. So, like I said before, an insult I've been hearing more recently is autistic. Autism is a lifelong neurological condition. I find that people have been using autistic to describe someone as rude or weird, and that people use autistic as an insult because they either don't know what autism is, or they genuinely think of autistic people as rude or weird, or they just don't know what it means but knows the negative connotations. Now, you're probably wondering how autism got such a negative connotation. Well, it is from one certain man who says bazinga a lot. Now, believe it or not, I have an actual explanation for this. While this character wasn't confirmed to be autistic, he was every autistic stereotype ever. And since there's not a lot of representation of autism in the media, people just assume that every autistic person must be like this guy. Rude, weird, and unempathetic. He just kind of gave autism a bad rap. The most common insult, though, by far, I'll hear is gay. It's normalized and commonplace at this point, and I'll find that people use it as if it's taken on a new meaning. The only problem with that, though, is that it doesn't have any new definition. It has the same meanings it's had for decades. It has a negative effect because of that. Using gay as an insult just implies the idea that queer people are bad or wrong. And considering the fact that queer people are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide, I just don't think using gay as an insult is worth it. Another very common insult I'll hear is sped. Sped stands for special education. People use it as if it means dumb. I'll find that people use sped as an insult because they just don't know what the abbreviation stands for, or they just equate special education to intelligence. People will often assume that people in special education are dumb or will have a sad or worse life. For example, one of my family members was talking about a boy at their school with Angelman syndrome who was in a special education classroom. She was saying how, he'll have such a sad, worse life and he'll never be successful. But when I asked her if he was happy, she said, yes, he's a very happy kid. So you should never push your own views of a happy or successful life onto other people. Another very common insult I'll hear is the R word. The R word was originally a medical term, dates all the way back to 1426. Back then it meant to hinder. Then in the 1960s, it replaced the words moron, idiot, cretin, and imbecile to describe people with intellectual disabilities. Then in 2013, it was officially no longer a medical term when it was replaced by intellectual disability. They changed it because it spread negative connotations, spread misinformation, and was, and still is, being used as an insult. These aren't just words, though. These are people. According to the National Institute of Health, 15 to 25% of the population in the U.S. is neurodivergent, and according to the Pew Research Center, more than 7% of people in the U.S. are queer. So you don't know who you're offending when you use these insults. It also just spreads misinformation. Say there's a kid at school who's only ever heard autistic as an insult and, like most people, doesn't really know what autism is. Then let's say that kid grows up to be a manager, for example. They're going to be a lot less likely to hire someone who discloses that they're autistic because of that negative connotation it gained from being used as an insult. So you don't know what potentially really good coworker you're missing out on, or a really good friend. Another thing to note is that according to the CDC, 1 in 4 people in the US have a disability, and now this isn't a threat, like I'm just saying. You could join that statistic at any time. So yeah, making fun of disabled people, probably a bad idea. Obviously don't make fun of disabled people in general, but especially for silly reasons like that. I mean, it's not like people get to choose how they're born. It's not like you get a bubble sheet to fill out in the womb or anything. No, you just get thrust out into the world like everybody else. You don't get to choose to be an outcast, to be hated, to be at a disadvantage just because the world wasn't built for you. The only people who do get a choice is you. Choose to be the bigger person, to be past this nonsense of semantics. I mean, we're all just trying to survive anyways, especially here in a place like high school. So if you hear people using these insults, call them out. It does work. For example, there was a kid in my biology class who said the organism we were looking at under the microscope was autistic because it spun around and ran into things. But when I called him out on it, he never said anything like that again. If I didn't say anything like everybody else, then he would have just continued on thinking that it was okay to use as an insult. So call people out, yell at people if you want to, whatever you gotta do. I mean, my dad always says you gotta have connections, kid. So don't limit yourself and just be nice. Thank you.